Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for choosing Across the Fence. I'm Will Michael in this afternoon for Fran Stoddard, and it is the fourth Wednesday of the month, which means it's time for our Bird Notes program. And joining us, as always, is our bird expert and conservation biologist for Audubon, Vermont, Mark LaBarr. Great to see you. Thanks
Great
for being
to see
in.
you too, Will. Yeah.
Now, this is a great time of year. As you've referred to it over the years, the migration highway is underway.
Yeah, so right now, lots of birds are starting to move, and they're pushing through, and we have the Connecticut River Valley that runs north to south. We have the Champlain Valley that runs north to south. And then, of course, the Green Mountains that run north to south. So a lot of birds are using these migratory pathways to get to their wintering grounds.
And I have to observe before we get started into some pictures that one of the ways that I notice it is a particular sound. I hear Canada geese with a honk, honk, honk.
Yeah, so, waterfowl migrate. They move a little bit later. Canada geese are moving back and forth. They go north to south, but they often go east to west too, sometimes back and forth between the lake and areas to feed. So that is the sound of this time of year, isn't it?
Sound of that migration highway. So that's the sound. Am I correct in saying that some migrating species are easier to see than others?
Well, when you think about it, there's a lot of these small songbirds that are migrating. They're mostly migrating at night and moving through, but what we often are able to see, they're much bigger, are raptors and other, hawks, falcons, and everything that are beginning to move. And they move during the day, and depending on where you are, you can see lots of them.
And while we can see them, for a layperson like myself, it's not always easy to identify them.
No, and oftentimes they, it's not like they're flying right over your head. They're oftentimes flying at a distance. So getting up to those perches, Mount Philo, Snake Mountain, Putney Mountain down in Connecticut, are really places where you want to be in order to witness these big flights.
So what's one of the first examples that you could share with us today?
So, one of the big ones this time of year is the broad-winged hawk. Okay, this is a bird that nests. It's got those nice stripes on the back. But what's amazing about, these birds is that they will move in these big, what are called kettles. And they'll move down through the Lake Champlain Valley, and there'll be hundreds of them in these big kettles that circle up, and then they'll fly down and they circle up, and the sky just looks like it's filled with lots of little dots in it.
So is this unique to the broad-winged hawk? When we see something like this, is that our clue that it's the broad-winged hawk?
Yeah, I mean, if you see numbers like that, the other bird that you might see in good numbers like that is the turkey vulture. But the turkey vulture has that classic V-shaped wing. When I go down towards Bristol to watch my daughter play soccer, you see a lot of turkey vultures move through there. So you'll see them in good numbers too, but it's really the broadwings that have the really large numbers of birds that are moving
That's
down.
one of the few that I can identify, and I think it's in part because I don't know what it is. There's just something very distinguishable about that, even when they're a couple hundred yards above my head.
Yeah, and that V-shaped thing, they often have big fingers, it's an easy bird to identify.
And nothing like riding those currents and airs down by Mount Abe. That is awesome.
That's what they're doing. They're picking up those thermals that are lifting up, and they're using those as a means of moving south.
I talked about this, that's one that I can identify, the turkey vultures. Are there other specific features that, as we're down on the ground looking up, that can help us to find out the difference?
Yeah, another good one, we talked about that V-shaped wing. Certainly the osprey has basically, it has kinks in its wings, let's just say. Instead of having a straight wing across, you can see the osprey has that color pattern underneath, but the wings often kind of point back. And so if you look up and you see that form, you can be pretty sure that it's an osprey, especially with the patternings that go along with it.
And there's one that, I guess growing up, we all sort of know this guy.
Right, and here's the contrast to the osprey. Here with the bald eagle, you can see that straight wing all the way out. It's not bent there. And of course, these birds are big. So you see a really big bird with that straight wing line, it's a good chance, especially if it's an adult like this.
That's what I was about to say. Look for the straight wing line, because as a juvenile, they are not going to have that nice white color head.
Yeah, so it takes, 4 or 5 years for them to get that white head and white tail.
Yep.
And so there's in-between phases, but a really big bird with a straight wing, good chance it's a bald eagle.
All right, so from the big guy, what about some of the smaller migrating
Yeah, well,
guys?
the other one, too, that you might see pretty regularly is the red-tailed hawk. And that's a pretty common bird that we see during
Another one that I see as I'm traveling Heinsberg corridor down to Bristol.
And this bird is a bird of the open fields. You often see it. You can see it along power lines, or you can see it along the highway. And again, that very straight wing, but a very different color pattern underneath what you would find, and of course that red tail. And then the smaller ones, and we're dropping in size now, are the accipiters, which are the woodland hawks. So you're looking at like the sharp-shinned hawk here.
Yep.
And this bird has that really long tail, which differs a little bit from the red tail, but you can see that very square edge on the end of the tail. This bird is maybe crow-sized as it's moving along. It has those big, wide, hawk-like wings. And so, that kind of gives you an idea that it's an accipiter. Its size and that sharp tail tells you it's a sharp-shinned hawk. To compare it to is the Cooper's hawk. Very similar looking, but the tail, as you can see, is somewhat rounded there. And I always think of that rounded tail as forming a C, and so that's a Cooper's hawk.
Great insight.
Yeah, so those are some of the smaller raptors that are moving through at this point in time.
And those are also ones that over the years you've gotten, some of the viewer pictures that you get are often questions about these smaller raptors, because they will be at the feeders, or they will be in the backyard.
Correct.
And they're very noticeable.
Yes, so if you see them, oftentimes feeders there won't be any birds there. There's a good chance there's a Sharpie or a Cooper's nearby. They, like I said, are a woodland hawk. And so, those would be the ones that you would see at your feeders.
Well, we talked about geese. Hawks aren't the only raptors that are migrating.
Correct.
So you've got some other examples to share with us.
So we've got the falcons, and you're looking at one of the smaller ones, the kestrel. Again, the falcons have a much more pointy wing. So when they're flying, you can see that wing comes down to a point like that. That longer tail. A bigger version of the kestrel is going to be the Peregrine Falcon. And usually that distinctive facial pattern is something that tells you it's a falcon. But again, when it comes out to those pointy tips, and I'm being general here because everything varies, but you can be pretty sure that you're looking at a falcon. And then the last one is a northern harrier, also known as a marsh hawk. And the best way to ID that one, it too flies with a V-shaped wing, but it has that white tail patch right there. And these birds, especially, the males are known as gray ghosts because they have a very gray color tone to them. But if you see a bird that's, slowly cruising with a V-shaped pattern and that white rump, you can be, it's a pretty good chance that it's a harrier.
Now, will these examples also ride those thermals that we talked about earlier?
Yeah, they're all moving that way. Okay. They're all using it. They don't necessarily use it the same way as the broadwings. The big, wide, fat wings allow these birds to catch those thermals and pick them up and lift them. The other birds are using the thermals too, but may fly in different patterns and not kettle up like the broadwings and turkey vultures.
You have one other example that we wanted to get to here.
Yeah, so this is, when we talk about migration, we talk about really big numbers. The other one that comes to mind is the nighthawk. And the nighthawk has this distinctive wing pattern, and this is a bird that moves through usually at dusk. It's an aerial insectivore, so it's feeding as it's moving. And especially along the Connecticut River, where there's a dedicated group of people down there, they can see numbers in the hundreds that will move through. Earlier this year, I have some numbers here. They had more than 1,000 that they saw in a 3-hour period in Westminster. So usually right along the river, you know, they're feeding on the insect hatches, but a great bird to see this time of year, and one you can identify because of those 2 white wing patches.
And I'm listening to you talk about where they're seen. No wonder they have the Upper Valley Nighthawks baseball team.
Right, exactly. And you know, there's a dedicated group of community scientists that go out every night to view these nighthawks. Same thing down at the Putney Mountain has, you know, during the month of September, they have folks up there all the time watching for the other hawks and getting counts there. So, you know, Snake Mountain, Mount Philo, anywhere you can get a perch. There was a good day on Mount Philo earlier this month where they had 2,232 broad-winged hawks move through, 33 bald eagles, 29 kestrels, 30 sharpies, and 18 osprey. So really good numbers when you get a sunny day, winds coming out of the north, the thermals are working, tailwinds behind them. These birds are going to move, and people will go up on these places, and they're great places to look out across the valley and see these birds. Oftentimes they're little black specks way out. But if you're up there with good birders, you know, many of the Audubon chapters hold events. The State Fish and Wildlife Department held one this year. So you can go up and often find people up there with really good knowledge, good equipment that'll point these birds out to you.
Well, thanks for sharing some of those numbers too. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I want to share with our viewers that if they have a bird-related question, you can pass it along to Mark. We'll put the address on your screen. It's Audubon, Vermont at 255 Sherman Hollow Road in Huntington, and the zip is 05462. It's probably easier to send Mark your questions and pictures via email, and it's mlabarr@audubon.org. You go ahead and send that stuff in, and we'll get you an answer on an upcoming edition of Bird Notes.
That's right.
Great to see you, and enjoy the Migration Highway.
I will.
That's our program for today. We know you have choices, so thanks for choosing us. I'm Will Michael, inviting you to join us back here each weekday afternoon for another visit across the fence.